Jake Morrison had never been to a space court before. He walked down the long metal hallway of Harmony Prime Station, his boots making soft sounds on the floor. The station was huge, bigger than any building he had ever seen on Earth. Alien creatures moved past him in the halls, but they all seemed to hurry away when they saw him coming. He wore his best clothes today. A simple blue shirt and black pants. His lawyer had told him to dress nice for court. Jake thought he looked pretty good. He had even combed his hair and shaved his face that morning. The human did not understand why everyone seemed so scared. 3 security guards walked behind him. They were tall blue aliens called Karathi, and they wore thick armor that covered their whole bodies. Their weapons looked very big and very deadly. Jake had tried to talk to them, but they just made nervous, clicking sounds with their mouths. When they reached the courtroom doors, Jake stopped and looked up. The doors were massive, at least 15 feet tall and made of some kind of metal that looked like it could stop a tank. Warning signs in dozens of alien languages covered the walls around the doors. Jake could not read most of them, but he recognized the universal symbols for danger. The doors opened with a loud hiss. Jake stepped inside and his mouth fell open. The courtroom looked like a war zone. Thick glass walls separated different sections. Armed guards stood everywhere, at least 50 of them, all wearing the same heavy armor as his escorts. Their weapons were pointed at the center of the room where a single chair sat behind a force field that glowed blue. That chair was for him. Judge Veltar sat high above the courtroom floor behind layers of protective barriers. The judge was a hegemony species, which meant he looked like a giant octopus with too many eyes. His purple skin was darker than usual, which Jake's lawyer had explained meant the judge was very nervous. The judge's tentacles shook as he shuffled through papers with his many arms. The alien spectators in the viewing area pressed themselves against the back walls when Jake entered. Some of them were whispering to each other in their strange languages. Others were taking pictures with their devices, but they held the cameras with shaking hands. Jake waved at them and smiled. Several aliens in the front row fell over. A small gray creature that looked like a worried mouse ran up to Judge Veltar's platform. This was Zex, the judge's assistant. Zex whispered something to the judge in a voice so high and fast that it sounded like a squeaking toy. The judge's eyes all turned to look at Jake, and his tentacles shook even more. On the other side of the courtroom, the prosecution team sat behind their own set of barriers. Centauri Advocate Prime Kilnash was the lead prosecutor. He was a tall, thin alien with silver skin and 4 arms. Right now, all 4 of his arms were trembling. His team of assistant lawyers huddled around him, and they all wore what looked like bulletproof vests. Jake's own lawyer was an Altarian named Counselor Hexvia. She was one of the most famous lawyers in the galaxy, but today she chose to appear as a hologram instead of being in the room with Jake. Her blue, ghostly image flickered near the defense table. Even as a hologram, she looked nervous. The charges against Jake were simple. 3 weeks ago, his cargo ship had been stopped by Zentari Commerce Guild ships. They said they wanted to search his cargo for illegal goods. Jake had refused because he knew his cargo was legal, and the Zentari ships had no right to board him in neutral space. The Zentari had tried to board his ship anyway. Jake and his crew of 12 humans had fought back. It was not much of a fight. The Zentari had 40 ships, but human ships were built stronger, and human crews were trained better. Jake's crew had disabled 37 enemy ships and captured 3 others. Nobody had been killed, but a lot of Zentari had been embarrassed. Now Jake stood accused of violating galactic trade laws, resisting lawful authority, and something called aggravated intimidation. He did not understand the last charge at all. Judge Veltar spoke into his microphone. His voice came through the speakers, sounding scared and shaky. The court will now hear the case of the Zentari Commerce Guild versus human captain Jake Morrison. Before we begin, I must remind everyone that this is a Category 5 security event. All emergency protocols are in effect. Jake looked around the room. Emergency protocols seemed to mean that everyone was acting like he might explode at any moment. He scratched his head and wondered what all the fuss was about. Advocate Kil Nash stood up behind his protective barrier. His silver skin had turned almost white with fear. Your Honor, The prosecution wishes to state that the defendant's presence in this courtroom represents a clear and present danger to all assembled beings. We request that he be moved to a more secure location. The defendant is already in maximum security containment, Judge Veltar replied. The force field around him is rated to hold a Class 7 battle mech. Jake looked at the blue glow around his chair. He had not even noticed it was there. He reached out and touched it with his finger. The field sparked and made a buzzing sound. Several guards raised their weapons. Please do not touch the containment field, Judge Veltar said quickly. It is there for everyone's safety. Sorry, Jake said. His voice was normal volume, but in the quiet courtroom it sounded very loud. Half the spectators jumped in their seats. I was just curious. Zex ran up to the judge again and whispered something urgent. The judge nodded and turned back to the courtroom. The court will take a 15-minute recess to allow security teams to run additional safety checks. Jake sat back in his chair and sighed. This was going to be a long day. He did not understand why everyone was so scared of him. He was just a cargo ship captain from Ohio. Before he started flying spaceships, he had been a school teacher. He taught third-grade math to 8-year-old kids. Those kids were scarier than any alien he had met in space. During the recess, more security guards filed into the courtroom. They set up additional barriers and checked their weapons. Some of them were carrying what looked like rocket launchers. Jake wondered if maybe there was some kind of dangerous criminal in the courtroom he had not noticed yet. The recess stretched to 30 minutes, then an hour. Jake could hear voices arguing outside the courtroom. Through the thick walls, he caught words like insufficient protection and request backup from the fleet. Finally, Judge Veltar returned to his seat. He looked even more nervous than before. After consultation with security experts, this court has determined that current safety measures are not adequate for these proceedings. This case is postponed until proper security arrangements can be made. The judge banged his gavel 3 times and quickly left through a door behind his platform. The spectators rushed for the exits like the building was on fire. The guards kept their weapons pointed at Jake until the room was almost empty. Jake sat alone in his glowing cage, confused and tired. He had taken 3 days off work to come to this court hearing, and now they were sending him home without even starting the trial. He stood up and stretched his back. The remaining guards all took a step backward. His hologram lawyer flickered over to him. I am sorry, Jake. This is not normal. I have never seen the court this frightened before. Something has changed in how they see humans. Jake looked around the empty courtroom with its blast barriers and military-grade security systems. What exactly do they think I am going to do? Counselor Hexavia's hologram shimmered. I think that is exactly what we need to find out. Commander Lisa Hayes stepped off the transport ship and onto Harmony Prime Station. She had traveled for 6 days from Earth to get here, and her back was sore from sleeping in the tiny ship cabin. Lisa was tall and strong, with short brown hair and dark eyes. She wore the blue uniform of Earth's Diplomatic Security Service, with a simple badge on her chest that showed she was important. The station felt different from other places Lisa had visited. Usually, alien stations were busy and loud, with creatures from dozens of worlds walking around and talking. But today the hall seemed quiet. The few aliens she saw moved quickly and kept their heads down. When they noticed her coming, they pressed themselves against the walls to let her pass. Lisa had brought 5 other humans with her. They were all security experts who worked for Earth's government. Their job was to keep human diplomats safe when they traveled to alien worlds. But today they were here for a different reason. They were here to find out why the aliens were so scared of humans that they needed an army to feel safe in the same room as one. Station Administrator Thisal was waiting for her at the main desk. He was an Etherian, which meant he looked like a tall, thin person made of light blue crystal. His people were known across the galaxy for being calm and wise. But when Thisal saw Lisa coming, his crystal body started to glow brighter, which meant he was worried. Commander Hayes, Thisal said in his musical voice, welcome to Harmony Prime. I hope your journey was not too difficult. It was fine, Lisa said. She tried to sound friendly and relaxed. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We need to understand what happened at Captain Morrison's hearing. Thisal's glow got even brighter. Yes, of course. Please follow me to a secure conference room. We have much to discuss. They walked through the station's corridors. Lisa noticed that every hallway they passed through was empty. It was like someone had cleared the entire station of aliens just so she could walk through it safely. The thought made her feel uncomfortable. The conference room was big and round with a large table in the center, but the table had been moved to one side of the room, and thick glass walls had been installed to separate Lisa's team from Thysol. There were speakers in the walls so they could talk to each other. I apologize for the barriers, Thysol said as he sat down behind the glass, but they are required by our new safety protocols. Lisa sat down across from him. What safety protocols? We're just here to talk. Thysol touched a control panel and a large screen appeared on the wall. Commander, what I am about to show you is classified information. Your government has been asking us why we now treat all human legal cases as extreme security events. The answer is not simple. The screen lit up with video footage. Lisa could see it was from a courtroom somewhere in the galaxy. A human man was sitting in what looked like a normal chair talking to a judge. The man was middle-aged and soft around the middle. He looked like someone's grandfather. This is Captain Danny Foster of the merchant ship Liberty Bell, Thysol explained. This footage is from 3 years ago. Captain Foster was accused of parking his ship in the wrong docking bay. Lisa watched the video. Captain Foster seemed calm and polite. He was answering the judge's questions and nodding respectfully. He looks normal to me, Lisa said. Watch what happens next, Thysol said. On the screen, Captain Foster started to stand up from his chair. The moment he began to move, the alien bailiffs in the room rushed toward him. They were trying to push him back into his seat. But Captain Foster was stronger than they expected. Without really trying, he pushed past. All 6 of them like they were children. The bailiffs had put special handcuffs on Captain Foster's wrists. The cuffs were made of the strongest metal in the galaxy. They were designed to hold prisoners who could lift cars with their bare hands. But as Captain Foster stood up, the cuffs broke apart like they were made of paper. I was just trying to stretch my legs, Captain Foster said on the video. Sorry about the cuffs. Do you have any that fit better? The judge and everyone else in the courtroom were staring at Captain Foster with their mouths open. The bailiffs were on the floor looking confused and embarrassed. Captain Foster helped them stand up and apologized for knocking them over. The hearing was postponed, Thysol said as the video ended. Captain Foster was very polite about the whole thing. He even offered to pay for new handcuffs. Lisa stared at the blank screen. That's why you're scared of us? Because one man broke some handcuffs? That is only the beginning, Thysol said. He touched his control panel again, and new videos appeared. We have been studying humans for 3 years now. Every time one of your people appears in our courts, something impossible happens. The next video showed a human woman named Susan Bell. She was a witness in a trial about a stolen spaceship. Susan was answering questions from the lawyers. She seemed bored and tired. When one of the lawyers asked her a stupid question, Susan raised her voice a little bit and said, "That's ridiculous." 3 judges fell over unconscious. The court recorder dropped his equipment and ran out of the room. Several aliens in the audience started crying. Susan Bell's voice measured at 120 decibels, Thysol explained. For most species in the galaxy, that is the same as standing next to an explosion. She was just talking normally. For a human. More videos followed. Lisa saw a human lawyer named Charles Knight lean on a wooden podium while giving a speech. The podium, which was made from the hardest wood on the planet Corax, cracked down the middle. Charles did not even notice. She saw another human, Robert Parker, sitting in a courtroom chair. Robert was nervous, so he fidgeted with his hands. The metal armrests of his chair slowly bent into different shapes as he moved his fingers. Robert was an accountant from New Jersey. He had never exercised a day in his life. We have documented 47 separate incidents, Thysol said. In every case, the human involved was trying to be polite and cooperative, but their normal behavior terrifies our people. Lisa felt confused and a little bit angry. We're not trying to scare anyone. We're just being ourselves. That is exactly the problem, Thysol said. His crystal body was glowing very bright now. Your species evolved on a planet that most of the galaxy considers to be uninhabitable. The gravity is too strong, the atmosphere is too thick, and the weather is too violent. Only the strongest creatures could survive there. Earth isn't that bad, Lisa said. Commander, your homeworld has hurricanes that can destroy cities. It has earthquakes that can split mountains. It has volcanoes that can change the weather across entire continents. Most species would die just from breathing your air for too long. Lisa had never thought about Earth that way before. To her, hurricanes and earthquakes were just normal parts of life. Every human learned how to deal with them. The beings in this galaxy evolved on gentler worlds, Thistle continued. Our bones are lighter, our muscles are weaker, our senses are not as sharp. When we see a human do something simple, like opening a door or picking up a book, we see strength that could easily destroy us. But we would never hurt anyone, Lisa said. We know that, Thistle replied. Your people have been nothing but kind and helpful since you joined the galactic community. But knowing something in your mind and feeling safe in your heart are two different things. Thistle showed Lisa more classified files. She learned that most alien judges in the galaxy now refuse to hear cases involving humans. The few judges who still accepted human cases had to take special medicine to calm their nerves. Some courts had built completely separate buildings just for human trials. Judge Veltar is actually considered very brave, Thistle said. Most of his colleagues think he is crazy for agreeing to see Captain Morrison. Lisa looked at her team. They all seemed as confused as she felt. They were just normal people doing their jobs. None of them thought of themselves as scary or dangerous. What do you want us to do? Lisa asked. We do not know, Thistle admitted. This is a problem that has never existed before. We have strong species in the galaxy and we have smart species. But humans are the first species we have met that are both strong and smart at the same time. It makes everyone very nervous. Lisa stood up from her chair. Through the glass barrier, she could see Thistle move backward, even though she was just stretching her back. We need to find a solution, Lisa said. Captain Morrison deserves a fair trial, and there are thousands of humans living and working in the galaxy now. We can't all live in cages. I agree, Thistle said. But first we need to understand why your people have this effect on others. Perhaps if we study the problem more, we can find an answer. Lisa nodded. She had a feeling. This was going to be more complicated than anyone had expected. Ambassador Patricia Cole had been Earth's top diplomat for 15 years. She had solved problems between countries, helped end wars, and made peace between enemies who had been fighting for centuries. But she had never faced anything like this before. Patricia was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She spoke softly and smiled often. On Earth, people felt comfortable around her. They trusted her to find solutions to difficult problems. But here on Harmony Prime Station, even her gentle presence seemed to terrify the aliens. She walked through the corridors toward the most important meeting of her career. Behind her walked two security guards, but they stayed far enough back that she looked like she was alone. Patricia had asked them to do this because she wanted to seem as non-threatening as possible. The meeting was taking place in the station's main conference center. This was where the galaxy's most powerful leaders came to discuss important matters. The room was huge, with seats for delegates from hundreds of different worlds. But today, most of those seats were empty. The Galactic Council's Judicial Committee was waiting for her. These were the most respected judges and legal experts in the known universe. They were the beings who decided how justice worked for trillions of creatures across thousands of worlds. They were supposed to be brave and wise and calm. Instead, they looked like frightened children. Chief Arbiter Quendal sat at the head of the curved table. He was a Vaxi, one of the oldest and most intelligent species in the galaxy. The Vaxi had been exploring space when humans were still living in caves. Quendal himself was over 400 years old and had seen everything the universe had to offer. But right now, he was shaking. The other committee members were just as nervous. There was Judge Morthak from the Krellin Empire, Arbitrator Yinze from the Peaceful Worlds, and legal scholar Bextel from the academic systems. All of them were famous for their wisdom and courage. All of them looked like they wanted to run away. Patricia took her seat at the far end of the table. The distance between her and the alien judges was almost 50 feet. She could barely see their faces from so far away. Honorable members of the committee, Patricia began, speaking in her softest voice. I want to thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I know this situation is difficult for everyone. Chief Arbiter Quendall leaned forward in his chair. His people looked like tall, thin lizards with golden scales. When they were calm, their scales were bright and shiny. When they were worried, the scales turned dull and gray. Right now, Quendall looked like he had been rolling in mud. Ambassador Cole, Quendall said, his voice barely above a whisper. We appreciate your willingness to discuss this matter, but we must be honest with you. The situation has become impossible. I understand you have concerns about human behavior in legal proceedings, Patricia said, but I believe we can work together to find solutions. Judge Morthak made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like crying. Solutions? Ambassador, do you understand what your people do to us? I'm not sure I follow, Patricia, said Arbitrator Yinsei. Touched a control on the table, and a large screen appeared on the wall. We have prepared a presentation to help you understand our perspective. What you are about to see may be disturbing. The screen showed video footage from courtrooms across the galaxy. Patricia watched as human after human appeared before alien judges. She saw Captain Morrison's hearing, where his simple presence had required enough security to guard a prison. She saw the footage of Captain Foster breaking his handcuffs without trying. She saw Susan Bell making judges faint, just by raising her voice. But then the videos showed things Patricia had not seen before. She watched a human businessman named Gary Thompson testify about a contract dispute. Gary was short and overweight, with thick glasses and a nervous smile. He looked like the least threatening person in the universe. But when Gary stood up to point at a document, his chair moved backward several inches. The chair was bolted to the floor and weighed 300 pounds. Gary had pushed it without even noticing. Another video showed a human woman named Betty Martinez serving as a translator in a trade negotiation. Betty was a grandmother from Arizona who spoke 12 alien languages. She was trying to help two alien species understand each other's position on a mining deal. But every time Betty gestured with her hands while speaking, the aliens on both sides of the table flinched. When she got excited about finding a solution to their problem, she clapped her hands together once. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. 3 aliens fell out of their chairs. We have analyzed hundreds of hours of footage. Legal, Scholar Bextool said. The pattern is always the same. Humans behave in ways that seem normal to them but terrifying to us. But these are just normal people doing normal things, Patricia said. Gary Thompson sells insurance. Betty Martinez teaches language classes. They're not soldiers or athletes or anything special. That is exactly the problem, Chief Arbiter Quendall said. If your ordinary citizens can do these things, what can your extraordinary ones do? The screen changed to show a new video. This one was from a military base on the planet Centauri Prime. A human soldier named Kevin Brooks was giving a demonstration of human combat techniques to a group of alien military officers. Kevin was not trying to show off. He was just explaining basic human self-defense. He showed how to block a punch, how to escape from a grab, and how to disarm an enemy with a weapon. These were things that every human learned in school, but the alien officers were horrified. When Kevin broke a practice sword in half with his bare hands, 2 of them ran out of the room. When he punched a training dummy and left a hole in its chest, the rest of them started taking notes like he was showing them how to build a bomb. Your species calls these basic techniques, Judge Morthak said, but they are beyond the capabilities of 90% of galactic civilization. Patricia felt a growing sense of understanding. You're not scared of what we might do. You're scared of what we could do. Exactly, Quendall said. We have done psychological profiles of your species. We have studied your history, your culture, your biology. What we found is deeply disturbing. The screen showed a new image. It was a chart comparing human physical capabilities to those of other galactic species. The chart showed strength, speed, endurance, and sensory abilities. In every category, humans were in the top 5% of all known species. Your people evolved on a world that most of the galaxy considers to be a death trap, Arbitrator Yinsei explained. Your gravity is twice what most species can handle. Your weather patterns would destroy our cities. Your oceans are filled with creatures that could eat our largest land animals. But we don't think of Earth as dangerous, Patricia said. It's just home. That is what terrifies us, Bextel said. You consider a death world to be a pleasant place to live. You think of deadly storms as nice weather. You swim in oceans filled with predators for fun. The screen showed images of Earth that Patricia had never thought about from an alien perspective. She saw hurricanes that could destroy entire cities. But humans just boarded up their windows and waited for them to pass. She saw earthquakes that could level mountains, but humans just built stronger buildings and kept living there. She saw footage of human children playing in snow that would freeze most alien species to death in minutes. She saw humans swimming in oceans alongside sharks and whales, creatures that most aliens would consider to be monsters. We have a term for your species now, Quendal said quietly. We call it casual omnipotence syndrome. You have the power to destroy most of galactic civilization, but you act like it's nothing special. We would never hurt anyone, Patricia said. Humans are peaceful. We want to be friends with everyone. We know that, Morthak said. Your diplomatic record is excellent. Your people follow our laws and respect our customs. But knowledge and emotion are different things. When a human walks into a room, we see a creature that could kill everyone present without breaking a sweat, Yinsei added. Even though we know the human would never do such a thing, our instincts tell us to run. It gets worse when there are multiple humans together, Bextel said. We have observed that humans seem to amplify each other's intimidation effects. 2 humans together are not twice as scary as 1 human. They are 10 times as scary, Patricia thought about this. She remembered times when she had been with other humans in meetings with aliens. She had noticed that the aliens seemed more nervous when there were several humans present, but she had never understood why. What do you want us to do? Patricia asked. We can't change what we are. We have been discussing this for months, Quendal said. Some members of the council have suggested that all human legal proceedings should be conducted remotely, using holographic technology. Others have proposed that humans should be required to take sedative drugs before appearing in court, Morthak added, just enough to make them move more slowly and speak more quietly. And some have suggested that we should simply refuse to hear any cases involving humans at all, Yinsei said. Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. You're talking about excluding humans from the galactic legal system entirely. We do not want to do that, Quendal said. Pete Williams was having the strangest week of his life. 3 days ago, he had been sitting in his small office in Topeka, Kansas, working on tax returns and thinking about what to have for lunch. Now he was on a space station millions of miles from Earth, about to be studied like a laboratory animal by the most important aliens in the galaxy. Pete was not the kind of person who usually got involved in important events. He was 42 years old, a little overweight, and starting to go bald. He wore thick glasses and had never been in a fight in his entire life. His biggest excitement most days was finding a good parking spot at the grocery store. But Ambassador Cole had called him personally and asked him to help solve a diplomatic crisis. She said she needed someone who was completely ordinary, someone who represented what normal humans were really like. Pete was not sure if he should feel honored or insulted. The demonstration was taking place in a special facility that the aliens had built just for this purpose. Pete stood outside the entrance, looking up at the massive building. It looked like a fortress crossed with a laboratory. There were armed guards everywhere, and weapons pointed at the building from every direction. Doctor. Elena Rodriguez walked beside Pete toward the entrance. She was Earth's top expert on alien biology and psychology. Elena was much smarter than Pete, but she treated him like they were old friends. This made Pete feel a little less nervous about the whole thing. Remember, Pete, Elena said as they walked. Just be yourself. Do the things you would normally do at home. Read the newspaper, drink some coffee, maybe do a few stretches. The goal is to show them that humans are not scary monsters. Pete nodded. I still don't understand why they're so afraid of us. I mean, look at me. I'm about as threatening as a marshmallow. Elena smiled, but Pete could see worry in her eyes. That's exactly what we need to prove to them. They entered the building through a series of heavy doors. Each door locked behind them before the next one would open. Pete felt like he was entering a bank vault or a prison. Finally, they reached the demonstration chamber. The room was enormous, with a high ceiling and walls made of some kind of clear material that looked incredibly thick. Pete realized he was looking at the most powerful glass in the universe. On one side of the glass was a simple living room setup with a comfortable chair, a small table, and a coffee machine. On the other side of the glass was an observation area filled with alien dignitaries. Pete counted at least 50 aliens watching him from behind the protective barrier. They all looked nervous and scared. Some of them were wearing what appeared to be armor. Others had devices that Pete guessed were weapons, though they kept them pointed at the floor. Chief Arbiter Quendall spoke through an intercom system. Mr. Williams, can you hear us clearly? Yes, sir, Pete said. His voice echoed in the big room. Several aliens in the observation area stepped backward when he spoke. Excellent. Please proceed with your normal daily activities. We will observe and take notes. Pete looked around the room. It felt weird to have so many important beings watching him do nothing special. He walked over to the coffee machine and started making himself a cup of coffee. This was something he did every morning at home, so it should be easy. But as soon as Pete touched the coffee machine, he heard gasps from the observation area. The machine was apparently heavier than the aliens expected. Pete picked it up with one hand to move it to a better position on the counter. He did not think about the fact that the machine weighed almost 50 pounds. In the observation area, a small blue alien fell over in a faint. Two others started taking rapid notes on their electronic tablets. Pete made his coffee and sat down in the comfortable chair. He had brought a newspaper from Earth to read, just like he did every morning at breakfast. He unfolded the paper and started reading the sports section. The aliens watched him like he was performing surgery. Every time Pete turned a page, they jumped a little. When he folded the newspaper in half to make it easier to read, the sound of the paper crinkling made several aliens grab each other's arms. Dr. Rodriguez stood near the glass wall speaking into her own microphone. As you can see, Mr. Williams is performing completely normal human behaviors. Making coffee and reading a newspaper are things that billions of humans do every single day. Judge Morthak's voice came through the intercom. Dr. Rodriguez, our instruments indicate that Mr. Williams just lifted an object weighing 23 kilograms with one hand. For most species, this would require both hands and significant effort. Elena looked surprised. 23 kilograms? That's only about 50 pounds. Pete, how much do you think that coffee machine weighs? Pete looked up from his newspaper. I don't know. Maybe 10 or 15 pounds. It's not very heavy. In the observation area, Pete could see aliens having excited conversations. They were pointing at him and waving their arms around. One alien was drawing diagrams on a tablet while others looked over his shoulder. Could you demonstrate some light exercise? Dr. Rodriguez asked. Maybe some stretching or simple movements? Pete stood up and put his newspaper on the table. He did some basic stretches that his doctor had recommended for his back problems. He reached his arms above his head, twisted his body from side to side, and touched his toes. The watching aliens were fascinated and terrified. When Pete stretched, his arms above his head, his fingertips almost touched the ceiling of the room, which was 12 feet high. Pete was not even a tall man, but his normal reach seemed impossible to the aliens. When he twisted his body, his spine made small popping sounds. This was normal for Pete, and actually felt good, but the sound made half the aliens in the observation area duck behind their chairs. Everything okay? Pete asked, noticing the commotion. Yes, everything is fine, Elena said quickly. Could you show them how you would open a stuck jar? We brought some props for demonstrations. A small robot rolled into the room carrying a tray of jars. They were sample containers that Elena had prepared for the demonstration. Some of them had tight lids that were supposed to be difficult to open. Pete picked up the first jar and tried to twist the lid. It was stuck pretty tight, so he gripped it firmly and gave it a good turn. The lid came off with a small pop. In the observation area, aliens were staring at readouts on their instruments with wide eyes. One alien was shaking his head and tapping his device like it was broken. "Mr. Williams," Chief Arbiter Quendall said, through the intercom, "our measurements indicate that you just applied approximately 400 pounds of twisting force to that container." Pete looked at the jar in his hand. "Really?" It didn't feel like much. The lid was just stuck a little bit. He opened the rest of the jars quickly and easily. Each time he opened one, the alien seemed to become more agitated. By the time he finished with the last jar, several aliens in the observation area were having what looked like panic attacks. Dr. Rodriguez was trying to calm them down through the intercom. "Please remember that Mr. Williams is being very gentle. He's using only a small fraction of his possible strength." This comment did not help. The aliens started talking to each other in their own languages, and Pete could tell they were upset, even though he could not understand the words. "Maybe I should sneeze," Pete said to Elena. "I feel like I might sneeze." "No," Elena said quickly. "Please try not to sneeze." But it was too late. Pete had been fighting off a sneeze for the last few minutes, and now it finally came. He turned away from the observation window and sneezed into his elbow, just like his mother had taught him to do when he was little. The sneeze was not particularly loud by human standards, but in the quiet demonstration chamber, it sounded like a gunshot. The force of air from Pete's sneeze moved papers on the table and made the coffee in his cup ripple. In the observation area, chaos erupted. Aliens dove under tables and behind chairs. Several of them activated personal shield devices. One alien started crying and calling for his mother in a high, squeaky voice. Medical teams rushed into the observation area to help the aliens who had fainted. Security guards raised their weapons, though they kept them pointed away from Pete. Chief Arbiter Quendall was trying to restore order, but his own voice was shaking. Pete looked at the chaos he had caused and felt terrible. "I'm really sorry," he said. "It was just a sneeze. I tried to hold it in." Dr. Rodriguez put her hand to her forehead. "It's okay, Pete. You didn't do anything wrong." But Pete could see that the situation was not okay. The aliens were more scared of humans now than they had been before the demonstration. He had tried to show them that humans were harmless, but instead, he had proven that even the most ordinary human was a walking disaster from their perspective. Through the observation window, Pete could see aliens packing up their equipment and preparing to leave. They moved quickly, like they wanted to get as far away from him as possible. Some of them were still shaking. Chief Arbiter Quendall's voice came through the intercom one last time. "Thank you, Mr. Williams. This has been very educational. We have learned much about human capabilities." Pete sat down in his chair and finished his coffee. He had a feeling that he had just made the diplomatic situation much worse, but he still did not understand what he had done that was so scary. He was just a normal guy from Kansas who sold insurance and did his own taxes. 6 months had passed since Pete Williams had accidentally terrified the most important judges in the galaxy. In that time, everything had changed. The aliens had not become less afraid of humans. Instead, they had become much more organized about their fear. Captain Jake Morrison finally got his day in court, but the courtroom looked nothing like it had before. The Harmony Prime Station had built an entirely new legal facility just for human cases. The building looked like a military fortress from the outside, with thick walls and heavy weapons mounted on every corner. Inside, the courtroom was even more impressive. The walls were made of metal that could stop a nuclear explosion. The ceiling was reinforced with support beams that could hold up a collapsing mountain. Force fields crisscrossed the room like a spider web of blue light. Jake sat in the center of it all, inside what the aliens called a containment pod. The pod was a clear sphere made of the strongest material in the galaxy. It was designed to hold creatures that could punch through battleship armor. The aliens had built it specifically for one middle-aged cargo ship captain from Ohio. Judge Veltar looked very different from the last time Jake had seen him. The judge now wore what appeared to be a complete suit of powered armor. The armor was silver and black, with glowing lights that showed it was active. Through the helmet's visor, Jake could see Veltar's nervous eyes. The bailiffs in the courtroom looked like they were preparing to fight a war. There were 30 of them, all wearing armor that made them look like robots. Their weapons were so large that Jake was not sure how they could even lift them. Each bailiff had backup weapons, backup armor, and backup weapons. Behind the judge's bench, additional security teams waited in hidden positions. Jake could see the barrels of very large guns poking through slots in the walls. He counted at least 50 different weapons pointed at his containment pod. In the observation area, a few brave aliens had come to watch the historic trial. They sat behind barriers that could probably stop a meteor impact. Most of them wore protective gear and kept emergency breathing equipment close at hand. Judge Veltar activated his microphone. His voice came through the speakers, sounding very official and very scared. The court will now resume hearing the case of Zentari Commerce Guild versus human captain Jake Morrison. Before we proceed, I must remind everyone that this is a Category 5 security event with extreme prudence protocols in full effect. Jake looked around at all the weapons and armor and force fields. Your Honor, this seems like a lot of security for a trade dispute. His normal speaking voice activated proximity alarms throughout the courtroom. Red lights started flashing, and several automated defense systems hummed to life. Jake quickly lowered his voice to barely above a whisper. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I forgot about the noise restrictions." Zentari Advocate Prime Kilnash stood up behind his reinforced podium. He was wearing what looked like a full environmental suit, as if he were exploring a toxic planet. His voice came through electronic filters that made him sound like a robot. "Your Honor, the prosecution maintains that the defendant's actions constitute a clear violation of galactic commerce regulations. The defendant used excessive force against lawful Zentari inspection vessels." Jake's lawyer, Counselor HFY, appeared as a hologram near the defense table. She had refused to be physically present in the courtroom after seeing the security briefings. Her blue, translucent image flickered slightly as she spoke. "Your Honor, my client acted in legitimate self-defense against what amounted to piracy. The Zentari ships had no legal authority to board his vessel in neutral space." Judge Veltar reviewed the case files on his armored tablet. "The court has examined the evidence submitted by both parties. Counselor HFY, your client's ship. Logs show that he disabled 37 Zentari vessels in less than 10 minutes. How do you explain this?" "Standard human defensive procedures, Your Honor," HFY replied. Captain Morrison's crew followed basic protocols for repelling boarders. In the observation area, several aliens started taking notes frantically. Jake heard one of them whisper something about standard protocols and basic procedures in a voice full of terror. Judge Veltar looked at more documents. "The prosecution has submitted medical reports showing that Zentari crew members suffered severe psychological trauma from this encounter. Several of them are still receiving therapy. They tried to steal my cargo," Jake said quietly. "I just stopped them." The judge's armor made mechanical sounds as he turned to look at Jake. "Captain Morrison, the Zentari ships were armed with military-grade weapons. Your vessel was a simple cargo hauler. How did you achieve tactical superiority?" Jake shrugged, forgetting that he was in a containment pod. The movement activated motion sensors throughout the courtroom. Automated targeting systems swiveled to track him, and several bailiffs raised their weapons. "Sorry," Jake said, holding very still. "I just used the weapons my ship came with. Human cargo ships have decent defensive systems." "Decent defensive systems," Judge Veltar repeated slowly. "Captain, your cargo ship destroyed or disabled 40 Zentari military vessels. The Zentari Navy considers this the worst defeat in their history. They weren't very good at fighting," Jake said. "Most of them ran away after the first few shots." Advocate Kilnash made a sound that might have been crying. "Your Honor, the defendant speaks of military victory against an entire fleet as if it were a minor inconvenience." "Because it was," Jake said. "The whole thing took maybe 15 minutes. Then I had to fill out paperwork for hours. In the observation area, an alien scientist was frantically updating his calculations on a tablet. Jake could see numbers scrolling across the screen too fast to read. The scientist showed his results to the alien sitting next to him, who immediately fainted. Judge Veltar consulted with his court advisors. They had a whispered conversation that lasted several minutes. Finally, the judge returned his attention to the courtroom. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, this court finds that Captain Morrison acted within his rights under galactic self-defense statutes. The Zentari Commerce Guild's attempt to board his vessel without proper authority constituted an act of piracy. Jake smiled. So I'm not in trouble? You are not in trouble, Captain Morrison. However, this court strongly recommends that you and all other human vessels avoid Zentari space in the future. For everyone's safety, Advocate Kilnash stood up, again. Your Honor, the Zentari Commerce Guild formally apologizes for any inconvenience caused to Captain Morrison. We also wish to pay damages for the time he spent in this legal proceeding. How much? Jake asked. Kilnash consulted his tablet. 50 million galactic credits. Jake's mouth fell open. 50 million? For a 2-day hearing? It seems appropriate, Judge Veltar said quickly. Court dismissed. The judge banged his gavel once and immediately left through an emergency exit behind his bench. The bailiffs kept their weapons trained on Jake until the judge was safely out of the building. Then they began filing out in formation, like soldiers, retreating from a battlefield. Jake sat in his containment pod waiting for someone to let him out. After a few minutes, a small robot approached the pod and began the release sequence. The blue force fields flickered and disappeared, and the clear walls of the pod retracted into the floor. Jake stood up and stretched, making sure to move slowly so he would not activate any more alarms. He walked toward the exit, where Commander Hayes was waiting for him. How do you feel about winning your case? Hayes asked as they left the courtroom. Good, I guess, Jake said. But I still don't understand what all the fuss was about. It was just a simple trade dispute. Hayes looked back at the massive fortress they had just left. Security teams were already dismantling the weapons and preparing to seal the building until the next human trial. Jake, do you realize what just happened in there? I won my case and got some money. You just participated in the most secure, legal proceeding in galactic history. More weapons were pointed at you than most planets have for their entire defense. Jake thought about this. That does seem like a lot. Hayes pulled out her tablet and showed Jake a report she had been working. Hunters, I've been studying this situation for months. Do you want to know what I've concluded? Sure. Humanity has accidentally achieved something that no military force in galactic history has ever accomplished. We have complete strategic dominance over the entire galaxy, and we did it just by existing. Jake read over the report. It was full of statistics and charts and graphs that he did not really understand. But the conclusion was clear. Every alien species in the galaxy was terrified of humans. So what does this mean? Jake asked. It means we need to be very careful about how we use this situation. The aliens are not our enemies. They're just scared of us because they don't understand us. They walked through the station corridors toward the human quarter. As usual, the hallways emptied as they approached. Aliens pressed themselves against walls or ducked into side passages to avoid getting too close. Will it always be like this? Jake asked. I don't know, Hayes admitted. Maybe someday they'll get used to us. Or maybe we'll find a way to seem less threatening. But for now, this is just how things are. They reached the human quarter, which was a section of the station designed specifically for human visitors.